morning, one and all. I welcome you to the day two of the E-Symposium on Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. A systematic review attempts to gather all empirical research by using clearly defined systematical methods to obtain answers to a specific question. Meta-analysis is a statistical process of analyzing and combining the results from several similar studies. Not all systematic reviews include meta-analysis, but all meta-analysis are found in systematic reviews. A knowledge of statistics is like a knowledge of foreign languages or algebra. It may prove of use at any time under any circumstances. Our first speaker for today is Dr. N. Srinivasan sir, specialist endodontist from Hamad Dental Center, Hamad Medical Corporation from Qatar, who will educate us on the topic statistical methods in meta-analysis. I'm highly privileged to welcome amidst us Dr. M. Kavita ma'am, Professor and HOD of Department of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics from Tamil Nadu Government Dental College and Hospital, who will be moderating this session. We welcome you, ma'am. She completed her BDS in 1992 and MDS in 1998 from Tamil Nadu Government Dental College and Hospital. She has 22 years of clinical experience and has been teaching the UG and PG students. She's a recognized PhD guide in various universities for the past 5 years. To her credit, she has 64 publications in index international and national journals. She has delivered 43 guest lectures and scientific paper presentations. She is the editor-in-chief for the Journal of Operative Dentistry and Endodontics and the editorial review panel member for the Journal of Conservative Dentistry. She's received various awards, which includes the Vibrant Senior Endodontist Award 2021, Good Samaritan Award 2019, Academic Excellence Award 2016, Masterclass Award 2016, Award for conducting 100 CDE programs as Scientific Committee Chairman, and the Matthias Gold Medal. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kritika. Good morning, everyone. It's clear, no? It's audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. N. Srinivasan, who is currently working as a specialist endodontist at Hamad Dental Center, Hamad Medical Corporation, Doha, Qatar. He completed his undergraduation from Vinayaga Mission College, Chennai, and post-graduation from Government Dental College, Chennai in the year 2009. With over a decade of experience in academic research and clinical endodontics, he has contributed several publications and reviewed many articles in international and national journals. Often you find that the students you are trying to inspire are the one that end up inspiring you. I am very proud to mention that Srini was my postgraduate student and I was then a freshly promoted professor. He was one such student from whom I learned a lot. Myself and Maha ma'am were internals during his postgraduate practical examination. Hope Maha ma'am remembered that she recruited him as her staff on spot recruitment for SRM after Viva, I think, on a lighter side. Okay, he has predominantly worked with the data related to health sciences from various universities across the globe and has very good knowledge in applied statistics. He is efficient in handling several statistical software packages and has good understanding and handling experience of various statistical analysis methods and meta-analysis. Over to you, Dr. Srini, for your lecture on statistical methods in meta-analysis.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm very happy to do this presentation today in front of you and Dr. Mahalakshmi, ma'am. And I wish to express my thanks to Dr. Mahalakshmi, ma'am, and Dr. Rajkumar, sir, for inviting me to give this lecture on this topic, ma'am. And also, I thank the organizing committee members, especially Dr. Saravana Karthikeyan and Dr. Kritika, for supporting me regarding this program. Let me share the screen. Am I audible? My screen is visible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Visible.
Yes.
And proceed.
Yeah, very good morning to all the participants and the respected panel members. Systematic review and meta-analysis is a very vast topic, something similar to this ocean. We need a great depth of understanding. In this stipulated time, I will try to take you on a ride through this ocean as far as possible. When you start your journey into this ocean, initially you will be very excited. And once you reach a certain distance, travel a certain distance, you will realize that you will be entirely surrounded by water and you will forget your way. The same way, the presentation contains a lot of numbers and plots. So please don't miss your way and hold on. Let's sail through the sea. And you are familiar with this pyramid, evidence hierarchy for evidence pyramid. And systematic review and meta-analysis is at the top of this pyramid, which is going to give the strong evidence among all the existing studies. Let us zoom into the apex of this pyramid. And I'm posting a question here. Does really a meta-analysis giving a strong evidence? So let's see what happens. Already you are exhausted with your literature search using some explicit criteria and finding studies from the literature bank, I can say. And after filtering the studies by using some specific inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, finally you have few studies on your table for the quantitative synthesis. Now you have finished your data characterization and quality assessment. Now we are moving to the next step called meta-analysis, which is nothing but a statistical synthesis of the quantitative results of your included studies. Everybody says meta-analysis means quantitative. Yes, of course, it is quantitative. It is not only quantitative. In this picture, you can see some coins. If you note carefully, the coins are segregated according to the size, color, and value. In the same way, the included studies in the meta-analysis have many variations on several aspects. So we need to find that variability. So meta-analysis is not just a quantitative summary. It is also to find out the variability existing across the studies. And coming to the objectives of the meta-analysis, majority of you know what is a meta-analysis and what are the objectives of the meta-analysis. The first and foremost point is, of course, everybody knows the power is going to be the more. The power of the estimate is high for a meta-analysis. Here we are pulling up all the studies and the sample size, the overall sample size is higher, and eventually the power or the precision is going to be high. And we are going to quantify the overall effect size. With the overall effect size, we are going to improve the applicability to the patients or the population. And as I mentioned earlier, the variability. We are going to find, is there any variation? The results are consistent, or is there any uncertainty in the results? So we are going to find the variability. The last 4 points are something different. The meta-analysis may answer questions which is not posed by individual studies. An individual study did not answer or cannot answer a particular question, can be answered by the findings of a meta-analysis. We will see that. And also we can find and identify the factors. It may be a moderator, it's called covariate, we can say, a factors which influences the study outcome or the effect. And also it settles the controversies between two conflicting studies. And it helps us to generate new hypotheses. So like that, we have several objectives, and we will see each and every objective in the upcoming slides with an example. Meta-analysis, like all other studies, meta-analysis also needs a sample. Let me take a randomized control trial. For randomized control trial, what is the sample? The target population. We are going to take the sample from the target population. From the sample, we are going to do some study on these samples, and we are estimating some measure. And this estimate is again inferred back to the population. The same here in meta-analysis, The population is nothing but the target population is nothing but the population of studies, are also the literature. Literature bank, I can say. From this population of studies, we are going to select few included studies based upon the criteria, systematic criteria. Now, with this included studies, we are going to estimate some measure. It may be anything. This estimate is inferred back to the population of the studies. We are same like the randomized control trial. We are going to refer back to the population of the studies. So what are we going to estimate? The estimate may be anything. It may be the efficacy in a treatment, like a difference between a control group and a treatment group or intervention group, or we may measure the odds ratio or a relative risk or a risk of a complication or a risk difference. Or if it is going to be a diagnostic test, we can measure the sensitivity, specificity, etc. Or we can find the relationship between two continuous variables. Say, I can say, what is the relationship between the micro hardness and the micro tensile bond strength? Is there any relationship or not? So we will be having a value called correlation coefficient, and with that we can measure. So like that, we have even more estimating effect size, like hazard ratios in survival studies, or a prevalence based studies, or incident rate. So we can estimate anything. Sorry. So when is the right time to do a meta-analysis? When you have multiple high quality, please, each and every word is important here. I am mentioning as multiple. See, theoretically speaking, if you have at least 2 articles, you can do a meta-analysis. But what is the point in doing a meta-analysis with the 2 articles? What is the level of evidence you are going to attain? So at least you need some handful of articles to make your evidence strong. So multiple high quality studies, not low quality studies, and studies with similar design, population, comparators, and outcome measures. If all these things are there, we can go ahead with meta-analysis. Now already there are few articles on your table for quantitative synthesis. Let's move on to my topic. The topic for my presentation is on about statistical steps in the meta-analysis. As a background picture indicates, the meta-analysis is a team effort. And this has been addressed already by the study speakers, Dr. Nivedita ma'am and Dr. Velmurugan sir. So it's a team effort. Even for the statistical analysis, we need a team effort. Let me explain the steps which I'm going to cover during in this presentation. The first is extracting data from the primary study. Whatever the study included is called as a primary study. Okay, so we are going to extract the relevant data from the primary studies and coding if necessary, whatever the appropriate coding necessary. So this extracting data is different from the data characterization, which Nivedita ma'am explained yesterday. Okay, this is something different. I will show you. Once you extracted the data and enter into an Excel sheet, you will be giving this Excel sheet data to the statistician. He will be computing the effect size. The second step is computation of the effect size. The third is aggregating the effect size. And fourth and fifth is very important step, assessing heterogeneity and publication bias. Okay, so the next step is the publication. The first step, extracting data. As the picture indicates, I suggest you to extract as much as data from your primary studies. And you have to enter it in Excel sheet. Before looking into the Excel sheet, let us see what are the types of studies and the outcome variables. Just I will give an intro, then we can move on. Coming to the studies, if you take a clinical studies, we have case series, reports, case control studies, prospective cohort studies, retrospective cohort studies, randomized control trial studies. These are the commonly available studies in a clinical study. Now, you can synthesize evidence from these studies, out of which the systematic review and meta-analysis are considered as the top notch, and it is like a magnifying lens, and through this lens we are going to look into these studies. Okay, irrespective of the type of the study, the variable is going to be either the outcome variable, outcome measure is going to be either continuous or dichotomous or a proportion based. Right? 1 minute, I'm sorry. Is the slide completely visible to everyone?
Yes, Srini, you can proceed. Yeah, visible.
Yes. Now looking into the variables. The variables, the commonly used outcome measure variables are continuous variable, a dichotomous variable. For studies which having a continuous variable as outcome measure, you have to give sample size, mean, and standard deviation for the treatment and control group. What are the data you are supposed to collect and enter into an Excel sheet? Okay, mean, standard deviation, and sample size for both treatment control group. Similarly, for a dichotomous or binary data, you have to give data for number of events in the treatment group and total samples in the treatment group. Similarly, number of events. The events may be success or failure, anything it may be, a positive event or negative event, whatever it may be. Number of events in the control group and total samples in the control group. Alternately, you can give number of success and failure in treatment group, number of success and failure in the control group. Depending upon the software, your statistician will ask different way of entering the data. So both ways are same. Okay? And for a diagnostic test accuracy, you are supposed to provide true positive value, true negative value, false positive value, and false negative value, which are observed in each and every study. Okay? So these are all the basic data. Apart from all these data, the above studies should contain the study label indicating the author name and the year. Is a mandate, is the identification label. And if applicable, you can include some moderator variables. Moderator variables I will explain later. Okay. Now this Excel sheet shows the data, how to enter a data for an study which is using a continuous outcome measure. Here, the objectives, these are the studies, study EEFF, these are the studies, 10 studies are included. These studies compare, these are the fictitious data, these are not real data. Just for illustrative purpose, I have created this data and the title, what, everything. Okay. So let us consider these are all the studies which compares the remineralization efficacy of nanohydroxyapatite and fluoride on erosive lesions, which is measured by Vickers hardness number. So what are the variables I have given? I have given the study ID and I have given a separate variable year in a we can, it may be useful for a cumulative meta-analysis. So the most important variable is mean standard deviation and sample size for treatment group and mean standard deviation and sample size for control group. And there are additional 2 variables here. These are called as moderator variables. I will reveal it later. Similarly, for a dichotomous data. Here, these are the studies which has a outcome, a proportion-based outcome, like success, failure. These are the studies compares the anesthetic efficacy of a Gauguet's technique and inferior alveolar nerve block in patients with irreversible pulpitis, and they are measured in proportion. Okay. So what data I have? Study ID, intervention group, success in intervention group, failure in intervention group. So success in control group and failure in control group. There is one more variable. It is a moderator variable. I will be revealing later. Okay. Now going to the step 2. Now you finished your data entry and coding everything. Okay. The simplest way of making entry. The next step is computing the effect size. Effect size, without effect size, meta-analysis is not possible. So you need to know what is an effect size. It is a statistical term, of course. You need to know what is an effect size and how to measure it. This is a very important step. Effect size is a measure of magnitude and direction of either a relationship or difference between the groups. It might be confusing to you. Let me explain with the example. Let us take a continuous variable, our fluoride study. Okay. The treatment mean is 294 in study 1, study A, I might say, and the control mean is 286. And the effect size, which I am going to use, is a mean difference, which is nothing but difference between these two, 294 and 286, which is 8. And similarly in B, 288 minus 298 is going to be minus 10. Here, the direction is indicated by the sign. If it is minus 10 means it is favoring the control. If it is a plus means it is favoring the treatment. So like that. So we are going to, effect size is calculated by mean treatment and mean control. So it is like that. And the magnitude is reflected by your numbers. So now you read the definition. Effect size is a measure of magnitude, that is numbers, and direction of difference between the groups. Here I am mentioning the difference. Let me give an example for relationship. This is a odds ratio. Let us consider our Gauguet's and inferior nerve block study. Number of success in the treatment group is 69, and in Gauguet's group, and number of failure is 54. Similarly, In IA and B, there are 54 success and 62 failure. We are going to compute a odds ratio. The odds of success is equal to odds of success in the treatment group by odds of success in the control group. Here the numerator is treatment group. If the odds ratio is greater than 1, which is the direction is favoring the treatment. If the odds ratio is less than 1, which means favoring the control, depending upon the numerator. Okay. If odds ratio, any ratio, if it is going to be 1, it means no, it's a null effect, equal effect. Okay. If it's more than 1, favoring treatment, less than 1, it's favoring the control. So here, this effect size is a measure of magnitude and direction. Direction here means lesser than 1 or greater than 1 of the relationship between the groups. So now you know what is the effect size and how we are going to compute the effect size. Computing effect size over. Now, what are the various measures of the effect size? Already we have seen a continuous variable can be measured by a mean difference. There is another one called a standardized mean difference. This is more acceptable one. Okay. When can we use standardized mean difference? In our example, the outcome measure is Vickers hardness number, which is across all the studies. So we can use mean difference. But suppose if all the included 10 studies is not measured using VHN, only 3 or 4 used VHN. The other few studies used Knoop hardness number and other 2 or 3 studies used a nano hardness. Now, how will you convert all these 3 different scales into a uniform scale? There comes the standardized mean difference scale, where the standard deviation is used as a scale to mark the effect size. Okay, so generally this is the most acceptable outcome, means effect size measure for a continuous variable. Even though in our study Vickers hard numbers is uniform across all the groups, we assume like that. Sometimes there may be a variability in the machine itself, the instrument itself. So to overcome it, it's better to use a standardized mean difference. Similarly, for dichotomous, the best outcome measure is odds ratio, and any ratio scale will be automatically converted into logarithmic form. Then it will be back transformed to the normal odds ratio form. Okay, I don't want to get into this. The other one is a risk ratio, particularly for prospective studies. And if you're going to evaluate a negative outcome like the risk of tooth fracture of your root canal treated tooth, means we can use the risk ratio. And even for that also we can use odds. Odds ratio can be used for any binary data. Risk ratio we can use selectively. And risk difference, not commonly used. If you want to use the numbers needed to treat to overcome the risk, you can use this. And similarly for the correlation data, to find the relationship between 2 continuous variables, you can use this correlation coefficient. These are the various outcome measures or the effect size. Okay, now you know about the effect size. With this, we are moving into the third step. Now you computed the effect size for each and every study. Now we are going to aggregate the effect size. Now, in this, we are going to see about 3 important topics. What is meta-analysis as such? We are going to deal with the forest plot. We will see the components of the forest plot by dissecting it. And what are the models involved in the meta-analysis? What is the difference? So meta-analysis. Now we have 4 studies. We have mean, standard deviation, and total number of sample size. These are the data we are going to give to the statistician. And with this data, we are going to compute something called as effect size. The effect size measure is standardized mean difference here. Okay. And these are the effect size of the 4 individual studies. With these 4 individual studies, we are going to compute a overall effect size, also called as pooled effect size. Please don't think that it is an average of all the 4. Definitely not. There is some statistical model involved in computing this effect size. We will discuss later. Okay. So overall, now the representation of this concept is your forest plot. Okay. So let us see the components of the forest plot by dissecting it. The first component is the study label, the study author name, and the year mentioned here. And the next is the mean, standard deviation, and the total sample size for your treatment group, and mean, standard deviation, and total sample size for your control group. And on the right hand side, you have something called as effect size measured in mean difference, which means the minus 19. You know what is mean difference? The mean difference, how do you calculate? Treatment minus control equal to mean difference. 269 minus 288 is equal to minus 19. So minus 19 is the mean difference. The negative direction is going to favor for control group. So like that. And apart from this, whenever you have effect size, you will be having a confidence interval in the thing, which means you are 95% sure that your effect size will lies between this margin to that margin. This is called confidence interval. Okay. So, and the next column is the weight. Every study will be assigned a weight based upon the sample size, the variation, I mean the standard errors, everything, okay, or the between the study heterogeneity. So here we have the weight percentage 10, 10, 10, etc. The summed up to 100. We have 10 studies, so it will be overall study is 100%. So the distribution of the weight to all the studies. As I said earlier, the weight of the study is assigned by the total number of samples, that is NN, and as well as the variation, standard deviation. Okay. The next comes the forest plot. The forest plot is an excellent plot, which gives, it's a graphical representation of the results of all the included studies in a single plot. It will give results of each and every study and the overall effect size. Okay. And in the left-hand corner, you have some heterogeneity statistics. We'll explain later. Coming to the forest plot, this forest plot is having a bottom line as a axis, x-axis, I can say. It is a scale which is similar, means which measures your effect size. Your effect size is here mean difference. So here the effect size ranges from -31 to +56. So your scale starts from -50 to 100. The scale will adjust automatically so that the effect size are plotted with respect to this x-axis. For example, if you're going to take the first study, you have a square here. This is called as point estimate. Point estimate means the center of the point is going to be -19. That is point estimate. Okay. And there are two lines, it's called whiskers. These end of the lines, this end lines is called as confidence interval, -34.682. I can see, sorry, something's hiding. 1 minute. So whatever, -3.3, I think, I don't know. So this lines indicates the confidence margins. And this is a diamond which represents the overall effect size. Okay. And the red line indicates line of no effect. Any studies which is crossing this line indicates it is not statistically significant. Here in this forest plot, all the studies are statistically significant. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the point estimate, and these two are the confidence interval. Okay. And coming to the diamond, there are 4 corners. The top and bottom corner represents the pooled estimate. Here, what is the overall estimate? Here, 6.20. So the top and bottom line corresponds to 6.20. It is called as the overall estimate. And the sides of the diamond indicates the confidence interval of the overall estimate. So this is the essence actually. Okay. So the overall estimate is 6.20 with the confidence interval. And it is the heterogeneity statistics here. We will explain later. And this is the main test statistics, which shows that this model, this random effects model, is not significant, which means there is no difference between the fluoride and the nanohydroxyapatite with these 10 studies. Now, let us go into the statistical models. We have got effect size of 6.20. How do we derive this effect size? It is not by simple addition, as I said earlier, but there are some statistical models involved in this. The commonly used models are fixed effect model and random effects model. For the same data, the 10 studies, I have made a forest plot using a fixed effect model and a random effect model. Here you can see there is a variation in the effect size. It's 2.10 and it's become 6.20. However, it is again not statistically significant. Both the diamond is crossing the red line, so it is not statistically significant. But if you keenly observe what are the differences in this fixed effect model and random effect model. Here, in the random effect model, see the weight of the studies, 8.94, 10.95, 2.95, and 1 is 23.53. It is varying. Whereas here it is almost consistent, which means the weight varies and depends only upon the sample size. So if the sample size is high, your weight of the size of the square will be bigger. The sample size is very low, 2.95. See the size of the square, it is very small. So the weight is varying in fixed effect model, whereas in random effect model, it assumes equal weights for all the studies. if you look into the diamond, see the confidence interval of this diamond. It is very wide, whereas it is very narrow. The reason is this fixed effect model assumes that the variation in the study occurs only because of the sampling error or sampling variability within the study. It means, or otherwise I can say, this fixed effect model, as the name indicates, fixed effect, which means there is only one true effect which exists across all the studies. And if there is any variation, that variation is only due to within the study variation caused by sampling error or sampling variation. Whereas in random effect model, the random effects model, the model name is random effects plural, which indicates that the effects are random, or I can say the effects may vary from study to study. So accordingly, this random effect model have assumption that the variability in the study may occur due to two reasons. One is within the study variation, similar to the FEM model, and between the study variation. So it accounts for two types of errors. So the confidence interval is wider compared to here. Okay. So these are all the differences between the fixed effect model and the random effect model. Here I am just to summarize the whatever I mentioned. I summarize this. Assumes that the studies are identical methods, which means that only one effect size is across all the studies. Here the effect size varies, random. Okay, and it consists only within the study variability. It consists both within the study variability and between the study variability. Here, the larger studies, I mean, the larger sample size studies assign more weight, and smaller studies assign less weight. Here, it's not. It is the weights are more balanced, and a confidence interval is narrow because we are considering only one error variability. Here, confidence interval is wide because we are considering two types. Now, which model to be used? Fixed effect model or random effect model? There are two schools of thought. One school says, if there is any heterogeneity, use a random effect model. And if there is no heterogeneity, use a fixed effect model. There is another school which says, always use random effects model. Let's see. In the step 3, we aggregated the effect size and we got the overall estimate. And we had a introduction about the models which functioning behind the scenes. Okay. Now, the most important step is assessing the heterogeneity. This heterogeneity and publication bias are very, very important. Okay. So let us see what is heterogeneity and the causes, how to investigate it, and how to overcome it. On a glance at this picture, you will find that both the pictures are similar. But if you look into carefully, there are some differences between this picture. So what is a heterogeneity? Heterogeneity is simply a variation between the studies results. So what causes the heterogeneity? Heterogeneity is measured by a number. So it is a numerical variability, numerical changes in the results. Since it is measured in number, everybody say it is a statistical heterogeneity. But actually, if you understand the concept, there are two other types of heterogeneity called as clinical heterogeneity and methodological heterogeneity. Clinical heterogeneity is the variation in the patient characteristics like age, sex, or whatever it may be, study settings, your interventions, a high dose, a low dose, whatever, and the outcome measures. And similarly, in methodological, you have different types of study designs included in the meta-analysis, or you may have a low-risk study, a high-risk study. So these are the variations within the study. So these clinical and methodological heterogeneity will result in statistical heterogeneity. So we have to rule out clinical heterogeneity and methodological heterogeneity as much as possible by applying Pico criteria and all of the, anyway, we are doing it in a systematic manner. We will be avoiding the heterogeneity as much as possible. So remember one thing, if there is a heterogeneity, it might be due to clinical or methodological mostly. Okay. Now, what is the importance of assessing the heterogeneity? Okay, there is a heterogeneity between the studies. What is the need? If there is a variation in the study results for the first study, second study, there is a variation means what will happen to the overall effect size? It changes. There will be a variation in the estimation of a single pooled effect size. It may vary across it. So if there is a variation, the clinician can make a clear decision whether this treatment is applicable to one type of patient, but not this type of patient. He can make a judgment based upon the variation. Okay. So it is very important to assess the heterogeneity. how to investigate the heterogeneity, how to know whether the studies are heterogeneous or homogeneous. There are two types. One is a visual method by examining the forest plot. The other one is a statistical method. We employ two statistical tests, a chi-square test, which tests the null hypothesis of homogeneity between the included studies. And if it is statistically significant, we reject the null hypothesis and we conclude that there is a heterogeneity. Similarly, there is a I-squared value. It is very easy to interpret. It is a descriptive statistics given in a proportion, percentage. 0 to 100% is the values. If it is 0 to 40%, they say there is no much heterogeneity. 30 to 60 means moderate heterogeneity. 50 to 90, it is substantial. And 75 to 100, it is considerable heterogeneity. Generally, using a I-square value to choose the model, as I mentioned earlier, different school of thoughts for choosing the statistical model is not, no, generally it is not advocated. I will explain. So let's see this forest plot. How to visually assess the heterogeneity? You can see some studies are favoring the nano-hydroxyapatite, right side of the curve. And there are some studies which is favoring the fluoride. So you can clearly visualize that there is a heterogeneity from the forest plot itself. And apart from that, you have a heterogeneity statistics. Your I-square value is 92.22%, which indicates considerable heterogeneity in this study. And your chi-square test, it is called a Cochrane Q test, which shows the statistical significance of 0.00, which means it is highly significant. Heterogeneity is there. So we have identified the heterogeneity using two statistical tests and visual inspection of the forest plot. One, if there is a heterogeneity, we are going to use random effects model. Yes, we are going to employ a random effects model. Now see, I have a statistical heterogeneity, so I have used a random effects model. Fine. In case I don't have a statistical heterogeneity, but the researcher says that there might be a clinical heterogeneity and there might be a bias, there might be a methodological heterogeneity. In that case, again, you have to choose a random effects model. The third scenario, you don't have any heterogeneity, but your goal is to generalize the results of your meta-analysis to the population. Of course, any study results is inferred back to the population. Even if you're going to do a meta-analysis, you are going to infer the results back to the population. In that case, a population is a varying nature. Again, you have to use a random effect model. Fine. So when to use a fixed effect model? When there is absence of heterogeneity and your goal is to infer the results only to the sample studies, whatever the include studies, you can use a fixed effect model. It is highly unlikely. We are not going to do this. Right? So always go for a random effects model. So now we have employed a random effects model and we have got a effect size of 6.20 and it is statistically not significant. Shall we conclude this result? We have a lot of heterogeneity here. Shall we conclude the meta-analysis result that after including all the 10 studies, we find there is no statistical significant difference between the nano-hydroxyapatite and the fluoride. Anything can be used. Shall we conclude? Is it correct? We have just investigated the heterogeneity, but we have not dealt with the heterogeneity. So using a random effect model is not a solution for heterogeneity. It's just a model to calculate the effect size. That's it. We are going to use that model if there is a heterogeneity. But it is not the way to deal with the heterogeneity. We have to identify what is the factor which is causing that heterogeneity. Let us overcome the heterogeneity. There are several methods to deal with the heterogeneity. The first and most important thing is to explore it by using two analysis called as subgroup analysis and meta-regression analysis. The other way of the other one is by doing some sensitivity analysis. The third thing is, if you are not able to explore the heterogeneity, if you are not able to identify the heterogeneity, cause for the heterogeneity, some authors says perform a random effect meta-analysis when heterogeneity cannot be explained and interpret the results cautiously. Which means they are asking to present the previous result 6.20 and no statistical significant difference between fluoride and nano-hydroxyapatite. In my opinion, it is wrong. For this result, it's better not to do a meta-analysis. We can wait. So we can stop the meta-analysis and we can wait for some other studies. Okay. So let us go and explore the heterogeneity. First step. by using subgroup analysis or meta-regression analysis. So exploring heterogeneity. Here, the first study is called as, first analysis is called as subgroup analysis with the forest plot. The another one is called as meta-regression analysis with a bubble plot. Okay. Here I am going to mention the variable, moderator variable. In the introduction, I mentioned about the moderator variable. So what is a moderator variable? Moderator variable is also covariate or influencing variable. So it is a variable that is going to explain the differences in the effect sizes. This moderator can be measured in a categorical outcome or a continuous outcome. Okay. If it is a categorical moderator, you can use subgroup analysis. If it is a continuous moderator, you can use a meta-regression analysis. For meta-regression analysis, you can use both continuous and categorical, but there should be one continuous. This is an important. So I don't want to go detail into the meta-regression. Just I'm giving the basics. Okay. Let us take the same nanohydroxyapatite fluoride study. I'm going to reveal these two moderators. See, I have found that some studies use low concentration of nanohydroxyapatite in the studies, some medium concentration, some high concentration. So I categorize the studies based upon the dose category, low, medium, and high. So I have given coding low 1, medium 2, and high 3. Similarly, I have one more variable called duration in weeks, the remineralization duration. Some studies have assessed the remineralization for 1 week, some for 2 weeks, some for 4, 5, 3, like that. So I have continuously measured this variable. So it is a continuous moderator. So dose of the nanohydroxyapatite, duration of the remineralizing agents, both the remineralizing agents. Okay. So let's see what happens. Let us go into the subgroup analysis. As I said, it is a categorical moderator, has to be used. Whenever you are going to use a subgroup analysis or a meta-regression analysis, or you're going to assess a publication bias or whatever, you have to mention it in a protocol beforehand. Okay. After seeing the random effect model results, if you don't go into the subgroup analysis, it may lead to unnecessary bias. So whenever you have literature in your hand and your data characterization is finished, before going into the analysis, you have to mention what in the protocol that I am going to use this analysis for exploring the heterogeneity and exploring the publication bias. Everything you have to mention very clearly. Okay, I will show that in the last slide. So what this subgroup analysis answers? Remember the objectives of our meta-analysis: factors that differs across the studies and settle controversies from the conflicting studies. Let us see this subgroup analysis answers these objectives or not. And coming to the categorical moderator, it may be a patient demographics like male, female, age category like young and old, and intervention dosage like low and high. We are in your example, we are going to use this one, low, medium, and high, the dosage of a nanohydroxyapatite. We are going to use this a categorical moderator. So you can use any categorical moderator. That's why I told you, you need to extract the data from your primary studies as much as possible. Use it and extract and give it to the statistician. Okay, you can analyze as much as you want. Now, coming to the subgroup analysis, I am categorizing the studies: low as 1, medium as 2, and long, high dose at 3. This is the subgroup analysis forest plot. Low dose, medium dose, and high dose. I have 2 studies with the low dose, 2 studies with medium dose, and I think 6 studies with high dose. Okay. Now look into the, see, in the previous random effect model, we had a heterogeneity of 92.2%. Now see the heterogeneity between these 2 studies, 0%. There is no heterogeneity. And look into the medium dose, no heterogeneity. And similarly, in the high dose, there is no heterogeneity, which means, and see the effects, how it is shifting from fluoride towards the nanohydroxyapatite, which means at high doses, nanohydroxyapatite is effective. Whereas at low dose and the medium dose, the nanohydroxyapatite is not effective. This is an important conclusion, how this particular factor influences the result, your research objective. And can you see 1 minute? Here, 91, I don't know. Yes, 91.62. Sorry, 92.22. This is the overall heterogeneity, which you got after including all the 10 studies, the overall effect size. But the subgroup effect size is C, minus 31 for your low dose and minus 14.65 for your medium dose. Both are favoring the fluoride. Yes, both are favoring the fluoride. And whereas the high dose category is favoring the nanohydroxyapatite. And this model, this subgroup analysis, the statistical significance between the subgroup analysis is here. It is represented by this one. It is 0.00. Sorry, I couldn't see this. Something is, I want to move this. Okay, anyway, no problem. So this is a subgroup analysis, and what is that? And you have the test of between the groups analysis. This is something like ANOVA study. Is there any statistical significant difference between these three subgroups? Yes, there is a statistically significant difference in the three subgroups. Low dose, medium dose, and high dose is having some statistical significance. Now, I wanted to exclude this low dose and medium dose category. I don't want to include this because this is not giving an appropriate comparison. So I wanted to do a meta-analysis by including only these 6 studies. Let me conduct a meta-analysis, and the overall effect is 22.5, and it is statistically significant, and the heterogeneity also is 0. Now, I have got an effect size of 22.55. Now, shall I conclude this effect size? Nanohydroxyapatite is effective at higher concentration, and the effect size is 22.55. Like that, shall I conclude? Closely look into the forest plot again. Even though there is no heterogeneity, I can see one particular variable is standing out, or I can say it is like outlier, and the sample size also very, very less, 10 and 10. The sample size also very 10. So when we can say this particular study can have some bias, like, or it may suffer from error, standard error, high standard error. So I wanted to skip this study. I'm afraid that this particular study is giving effect size of 56. This might overestimate my effect size, overall effect size. See, it is not about getting the statistical significance. You have to find the true effect size. Is that clear? So if the 56 is going to be included in this study, my true effect size may be overestimated. I wanted to know what will happen if this particular study is skipped out by doing a sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis means you can leave some studies and do reconducting a meta-analysis. So coming to sensitivity analysis, I'll give introduction, then I will conduct. A sensitivity analysis selectively removes studies that may be artificially influence the results. In our study, the AAA might influence the result. This is our assumption. Let us see. And what are the examples that the studies can be removed from the by doing a sensitivity analysis? Incomparable interventions, like previous cases. I don't want to compare a low flow rate with the high flow rate, so I removed the low flow rate cases. Different demographic characteristics of the patients, or poor quality studies. I suspect the AAA is a poor quality study. I don't want to include. There is some risk of bias. Okay, I want to remove this. And temporality. Some studies published several years ago that may not be applicable for the current practice. So I want to remove the old studies. So in these conditions, you can do a sensitivity analysis. You can skip and you can do it. Okay. Now I am going to do a sensitivity analysis, and one kind of sensitivity analysis, the leave one out meta-analysis, where I am going to leave this study AAA, and I have conducted a meta-analysis, and the overall effect size is 20.53, and still the statistically significant, which means the result says that even if you skip the study AAA, the study effect size is not varying much, almost similar, and it is strongly favoring the nanohydroxyapatite. And we can conclude that this high dose of nanohydroxyapatite is definitely performing better than fluoride. We can give this conclusion. See, from 6.20 to 22.55 to 20.53. We are narrowing down the effect size, and we are estimating the true effect size. The goal of the meta-analysis, objective of the meta-analysis, to estimate the true effect size. So it is done here, right? Next comes the meta-regression, and which using a bubble plot. Remember, we have completed a subgroup analysis using a categorical variable. Now we are going to use a continuous variable, that is, remember, duration in weeks. So definition, a simple definition, a statistical analysis used to test the effect of continuous moderator on the effect size. How a continuous moderator, like duration in weeks, is going to affect your effect size. And I am going to show you a bubble plot. In subgroup analysis, I showed a forest plot which contains both statistical part and graphical part. And in meta-regression, we have a statistical table and a separate bubble plot. Okay, the bubble plot is used after this meta-regression analysis with a continuous moderator to describe the relationship between the effect size and the continuous moderator. We are going to draw a graph in x-axis and y-axis. Y-axis will be effect size and x-axis is going to be your continuous moderator. And we are going to find the relationship between these two moderators. That's it. Now, this is a meta-regression table which we got from the Stata. For your information, the statistical analysis performed for this presentation is by Stata version 16. Okay, I forgot to mention this. This is the statistical output for the meta-regression analysis. Okay, remember our previous I-square value was 92.22. Okay, now the I-square has reduced to 47.07, which means still there is some residual heterogeneity is there. However, 92 is lessened down to 47, which means remaining 47% accounts for this duration. The duration in treatment is causing that heterogeneity, or I can say the duration is influencing the effect size in a positive direction. Here 13.855, it is in a positive direction. So might be, and it is statistically significant. Okay, so the statistical significance says that there is a linear relationship exists between the duration and the effect size. Okay. Now this is called a bubble plot. The red line is the regression line. Here, x-axis is your duration, your continuous moderator, and y-axis is your effect size. Okay, the 0 is the line of no effect. Now I am going to draw a line from the line of no effect towards the regression line and dropping the line down to the x-axis. What it gives, your see, this area favors the fluoride and this area favors the nanohydroxyapatite, and the line increases from fluoride towards the nanohydroxyapatite. Which means that as the duration of the remineralizing agent is increased, the curve is the line is shifted towards the nanohydroxyapatite. In other words, the longer duration of nanohydroxyapatite, it is better than the fluoride. Means if you are going to give the duration, extend the duration time by more than 4 weeks, the nanohydroxyapatite is found to be more effective. Previously, we found that higher dose of nanohydroxyapatite concentration is going to be effective than fluoride. Now, here we found that a duration more than 4 weeks is necessary for the nanohydroxyapatite to be effective. Or otherwise, I can say, if you want the remineration effect to happen within less than 4 weeks, you can prefer fluoride rather than the nanohydroxyapatite. So now this objectives, see, now some spurious, the question not answered by individual studies was answered by this meta-regression analysis or a bubble plot. What should be the minimal duration of the treatment with nanohydroxyapatite for it to be effective than the fluoride? At least 4 weeks. Less than 4 weeks, nanohydroxyapatite is not going to be effective. And with this, you can generate new hypotheses, right? With the subgroup analysis or with this meta-regression analysis, you can generate some new hypotheses and you can do further clinical trials. You can further extend your research. So now almost all our objectives are fulfilled in this presentation. Comes to step 5, publication bias. It is the last part of my presentation. Let us see what is a publication bias. Whenever we conduct a study, if you have a positive result, we'll start writing it and we'll send to publication. Even if it is getting rejected, we'll send to another journal. Still, we'll send and finally it will get published. If you have a study with a negative finding, will you show any interest to write up the article for publication? 90% no, right? The same thing here. So this is a serious threat to the meta-analysis. Okay. The greatest threat to the validity of any study, even the meta-analytic result, is the publication. Because the publication or non-publication of a research findings depends upon the nature and the direction of the results. It is not only your fault, even the journal accepts only if there is any significant finding. If there is no significant findings, particularly if a small study having non-significant findings, they will say there is no interest, means what to say, the article is not interesting, like that they may reject it, right? See, let us see. As I said, I mentioned earlier, you are hypothesizing objective, you're doing experiment. If you have negative results, you are throwing it in the dustbin, or it will be in your file and drawer. There is an analysis called file drawer analysis. Okay, and if it is a positive results, you will start writing it and submit your paper for the publication. So now, where is the question for bias here? Yes, of course, okay. We are going to publish only the positive results, negative results, very rarely we publish. So what is the question of bias here? See, if you're not going to publish your negative results, see, negative data is as valuable as a positive data. If you're not going to publish your negative data, and if you're going to publish only your positive data, and if you're going to do a meta-analysis, all the article included in the meta-analysis is going to be only the positive data or a significant data, significant findings favoring the intervention, right? So if you're going to analyze only with this positive data, we will get only positive finding. The garbage in is garbage out, right? So here comes, we are inflating the type 1 error. And moreover, positive results are more likely to be published, particularly in a peer-reviewed journals, published quickly, published in English language. So see, the bias. Published quickly means the time lag bias. Published in English language means it is a language bias, and cited by others. A positive finding will be cited by others. A negative finding is not frequently cited. So it is citation bias. So now the question of bias arises now. When I was explaining the publication bias, you will be thinking, where is the bias? Now there is a, I have explained what kind of bias it will cause. So what are all the consequences of publication bias? As I mentioned, it is going to inflate your type 1 error rate. Negative studies not being published leads to overestimation of the benefit, which is second type 1 error, and underestimation of the harm, same. And omitting unpublished studies from your review. If you are going to do a systematic review or a meta-analysis, and we are omitting the unpublished studies, means it is going to yield a biased estimate of an intervention effect, or we are not going to find the true estimate of a population. How to deal with, how to investigate it, and how to deal with. Same like your heterogeneity. How to investigate it by some statistical method. How to deal with, I will explain you. Okay, some investigating the bias. Again, you have a visual investigation means, and statistical methods. In visual, we will be using a funnel plot. In statistical, we are going to use some statistical test. Okay, these are the statistical tests used to identify the, indirectly identify the publication bias. Okay, I will explain. Coming to a funnel plot. Before going into the funnel plot, I want to explain about this funnel plot. Here there is an x-axis which gives the effect size, and the y-axis which gives either standard error or a precision or sample size. All are interrelated. Okay. This line is line of the overall effect. In this study, it is a picture from some study from Google. So in here it is 0.4 is the effect size. Okay. This line mentions the overall effect size, and each individual dots represents the studies effect size plotted according to the sample size. If the sample size is higher, the standard error will be lesser. So studies which is on the apex of this triangle has more sample size and lesser standard error. Studies which constitutes the base of the triangle are having high error, standard error is high here. See, standard is 0 here. Okay, high standard error with low sample size. Okay, so let me divide this triangle into two parts, the apex and the base. So apex constitutes the large studies. As I said earlier, apex constitutes the large studies, base constitutes the small studies. Now this funnel plot and what are the statistical tests I told you, Eggers regression, rank correlation, Beggs ranks correlation, all those things are going to assess the small study effects. We are not bothered about the large studies. Okay, large studies is definitely going to be accepted for publication because we are going to use a large number of sample size, and they will publish the results, and even the journal will accept it because of the large sample size. So where the problem comes, accepting a small studies, particularly if the small study is going to give a non-significant results, the chance of publication is going to be less. So the funnel plot is going to assess the small steady effects, small, not only funnel plot, all the test. So we can call this as a, instead of publication bias, we can call it as a test for small steady effects. Okay. Now I am drawing a line here. This is a line of no effect, 0. Logs of odds ratio 0 is 1. Okay, log 0 equal to 1. So this is a line of no effect. Steadies falling on this side is favoring the treatment. Steadies falling on this side favoring the control. Okay, and if it is falling beyond this line, we can say it is statistically significant. Okay, so 95% confidence interval line. This is the outline of this funnel plot. Let us see here. We have effect size of 0.4 here and here. We have several studies distributed on both the sides of the effect size, and I am drawing the 93% confidence interval. Can you tell, means the funnel plot is symmetrical on the both the sides, right? Because studies on both the sides, and for various here, see, studies only on the favoring the treatment side. So studies favoring the control group are missing, particularly the small studies are missing here. So it is asymmetrical, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Since it is a subjective method, I might say it is significant. It is obviously it is a very symmetrical and asymmetrical, we can say. Suppose if you have some studies here and 1 or 2 studies here, we can, it may be difficult for us to identify whether the funnel plot is significant or not. For that, we have to use the statistical test. Okay. Let us take an example, our Gauge study, our dichotomous data. We have approximately 17 studies, I think. Let us run this study. This is a forest plot I want to show you. The overall effect size log is 1.21, which means it is favoring the Gauge technique. Okay, it's a positive. And it is statistically significant. So just remember the effect size 1.21 alone. We will be using this while interpreting the publication bias. Okay. Now I am going to, so look at the forest plot. There is heterogeneity. Clearly heterogeneity is there, and the heterogeneity is 90% here. Okay. So just remember these two things, 1.21 and 90.34. Let us go to the publication bias. I am including all the studies for the funnel plot, and I found most of the studies, particularly in the base of the triangle, is significant and favoring the treatment, I mean the Gauge technique. And there are no studies for the inferior alveolar nerve block studies. And there are no statistically significant studies favoring the treatment group also. The non-significant small studies favoring the treatment groups also missing. At the same time, small studies favoring the control groups also missing. Whereas you look into the apex of the triangle, see, these are the larger studies. Larger studies on both the lines are present. Maybe some studies show significant, some studies shows non-significant. Probably there may be a moderator variable, we need to assess it. Actually, I included the moderator variable. Due to the lack of time, I did not run that. Okay. So the moderator variable might be influencing these results. Okay, that doesn't matter. Now in the apex of the triangle, we have larger studies on both the sides. But in the base of the triangle, small studies is missing. So the test for small studies shows that small studies are missing, and it may cause a publication bias. Now it is heterogeneous. Now I am conducting a Egger's regression test and Beck's rank correlation test, which shows that the p-value is significant, which means there is a significant asymmetry in the funnel plot. In both the tests, it shows significant asymmetry. Okay. Remember, these two tests shows that funnel plot is asymmetry. But remember, the asymmetry in the funnel plot may be due to publication bias or may be due to the heterogeneity. Already we saw that heterogeneity in the study is 92 or 90%, I think, right? 92 or 90%, I don't know. Whatever, it is high. Now, we cannot be judgmental with these funnel plots when there is a high heterogeneity. So we need to say whether the asymmetry in the funnel plot is due to publication bias or heterogeneity. So for that, contour enhanced funnel plot will help. Contour enhanced funnel plot will have 3 triangles like this. This line indicates the p-value significant at 1% interval. This line indicates p-value significant at 5% interval, and this line indicates p-value significant at 10% interval. we cannot say it's a 10 significant, because we always consider 5% and less as a significant. Okay, studies falling away from this line, this outer line, or this side outer line is significant at 1%. Okay, so these studies are significant at 1%. Here, see one small study which is highly significant. Studies falling within this category, this light yellow region, okay, are significant at a 5% interval. And studies falling within this category, we can say the p-value is less than 10%, or it may be significant if the sample size is increased. Okay, now studies falling into this dark area of the triangle, the center of this one, are considered as a non-significant studies. Okay, now if there is a actual heterogeneity in the study, and if it is that heterogeneity is influencing the asymmetry of the funnel plot, we might be having some studies into this dark yellow region. If there is no studies into this dark yellow region in the base of the triangle, we can say confidently that the asymmetry in this funnel plot is due to publication bias. Here there is no studies, which indicates that it is a publication bias. Okay, I forgot. Now we found that there is a publication bias. How are you going to deal with it? I'm sorry. Yes. First is analyze only the large studies. If you are going to analyze only the large studies, we will be having a lesser sample size. And moreover, it is not technically correct to exclude studies just because the study size is small. Okay, we need a valid reasons like low quality or something we need to remove it from the sensitivity analysis. Okay, so the next method is trim and fill method. It is a statistical method. And the third method is to include the unpublished studies into your literature. Let us see the trim and fill analysis. It is a non-parametric test to deal with the publication bias. As the name indicates, trim and fill. What it does is, now we saw these studies. Can you see this side? These are the significant studies favoring small studies significant favoring the treatment group. So what will this software do? It will cut all these 5 studies. It will calculate the effect size, and it will impute or artificially create studies on the other side of the funnel. Okay, now it has created 5 imputed, I can say imputed 5 studies here. So the total number of observed studies is only 17. Now the software has the test has imputed 5 studies. Now it will give a negative effect size. Suppose the effect size is positive this side, it will give a negative effect size this side. So all the effect size will be computed, and it will give a overall effect size. So actual effect size was 1.207, right, from the forest plot. Now, if you are going to impute these studies, as per the assumption of this non-parametric trim and fill analysis is, there are studies missing in this area. So it will impute these studies. These studies might be missing due to publication bias. This is what the trim and fill analysis assumption. So based upon this model, if you're going to impute these 5 studies, the effect size from 1.207 might shift to 0.653. Now it may be statistically significant or may not be statistically significant, right? So we need to address this. We have to mention. So after imputing the studies, the log odds ratio is decreased to 0.653. Still, it is favoring the GovGates only because it is above 0. Okay, it's a log odds. It's not direct odds. Okay, it is favoring the GovGates only. So now we have to conclude like this. Then the third step is including all the articles. Means we have to do a thorough back to square one. Do the literature search again, so that to minimize the publication bias. You can include your thesis, library, go to library, hand search, whatever. Everything is there. So I'm not expert in this area. I just taken this slide from another presentation. Sorry. So by including, by conducting a proper research and including the unpublished studies might minimize the publication bias. Now coming to the end of the session, when you're going to submit a protocol, so please mention these things beforehand. Meta-analysis will be performed to assess the influence of the treatments on the outcomes. Statistical heterogeneity will be assessed using so-and-so test and I-square test. Subgroup analysis and meta-regression analysis will be, will be performed to test the influence of potential effect modifiers on the results, and publication bias will be assessed using linear regression test by Eggers and contour enhanced funnel plot. So you have to mention these things. Okay, so these are the basic things I'm mentioning here. As I said, it's a ocean, so I cannot cover the intricacies of this publication bias or heterogeneity, everything. Okay. So putting in a nutshell means summarizing. So do a proper literature search from the available sources and extract data as much as possible. Please know your variables, the study types and its outcome measures, and enter the data along with all the possible moderators in the Excel sheet. Use random effect models as heterogeneity is inevitable. Look for heterogeneity, and if present, deal with it appropriately. Minimize publication bias. Go to the point number 1 and look for it and address it. Now, what is the answer for this question? Inevitable heterogeneity and presence of publication bias. So what is the answer for this question? Does meta-analysis still give strong evidence? The answer is yes, still meta-analysis is going to give the highest level of evidence, but it cannot give a strong evidence, but can give a sufficient evidence, or at least the best available evidence based upon the included articles. So we cannot equate the sufficient or best available to the strong evidence. Okay. So with this, I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you for patient listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Srinivas. That is an excellent, detailed presentation. You always find a way to get it done, the two statistics in an interesting perspective, I think.
Yes,
to summarize your lecture, he explained nicely about each and every step about meta-analysis, statistical steps. That too by showing a nice example so that we can understand easily. And I like that part mainly about the publication bias. That part is good and different. And my heartfelt thanks to Maha ma'am and the entire organizing team for this wonderful opportunity. Over to you, Maha ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Srinivasan.
Ma'am, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Kritika.
Now I request Dr. M. Kavita ma'am to felicitate our speaker, Dr. N. Srinivasan sir, with the certificate of appreciation.
Srini, as usual, you rocked the stage. That was the first lecture. Everybody heavy with so many numbers in their head. Nice, good.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session, and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
As a token of appreciation for Dr. Kavita for moderating this session, we have a certificate for you, Dr. Kavita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.